everybody. This is really a celebration of the tour we did in November. It really, I have to say, it exceeded my expectations. Hi, Teresa. So we're going to talk about the purpose of the tour, sort of setting the context for it, and how we can go about creating political will to deal with climate change. So, as context, I know we're all discouraged with Trump withdrawing the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accord, but the fact is, the U.S. is going to meet its Paris commitments without Trump's action. Because fracking, extracting a lot more gas, and it's replacing coal for electricity generation. And wind and solar have gotten cheaper. They're certainly competitive with coal. It's also forcing coal out. And then Obama's CAFE standards on the fuel efficiency of automobiles has driven improvements in efficiency of cars. And electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids have become very popular. They're getting cheaper and more popular. So that's driving down our emissions from cars. So we're going to meet those agreements regardless. Okay. But Paris is not enough. If every country met Paris commitments, the world would still warm by 2.5 to 3 degrees. We would still be losing Greenland ice, sea level. CO2 is already high enough to melt Greenland ice. It will take time, but it's already high enough. Last time it was that high, sea level was 25 meters higher than now. And we would also lose most of the Cascade snowpack with the Paris So we have to do better. And so that's really what we're about, is getting beyond Paris. And there are various ways to reduce emissions. You can do nothing, of course. You can do regulation, or impose a cap and trade. Congress tried that in 2008 and it's stalled in the Senate. Economists favor a carbon tax, because that can be a very pervasive price signal mechanism. And so I'm going to talk a bit about the carbon fee dividend, which is what Citizens Climate Lobby advocates. It puts a steadily rising fee on fossil carbon at the source, at the mine or the well, or imports from the countries. And that revenue then is collected and then redistributed back to the economy as an equal dividend for every resident. And then there's also a border adjustment to protect international trade, basically putting a tariff on carbon content of imports. So that's really, we spent a lot of time on the tour in our presentation talking about the carbon fee dividend, because it's central to our message. It takes some time to understand. There's been an analysis of the economic impact of it, average over the whole country. Would add 2 million jobs in 10 years and cut emissions in half, save 15,000 lives a year, and increase GDP by $1.3 trillion in population as well. So lots of good there, no really downsides, and that's really deals with the complaint about carbon tax being bad for the economy. No, it's not true. It's revenue neutral. It's good for the economy. Okay, so how do we build a political will for this sort of legislation? This would be national legislation. How do we get that passed? Well, you, of course, lobby directly. You need to get the members of Congress. That can be effective, but you can't just do it once. You have to build a relationship with the member of Congress and eventually get their attention. There's also campaign contributions, sad to say, that plays a huge role in the way our politics works. And the broadcast media is very influential. Talk radio influences a lot of people. So media reaches a lot of people. Endorsements from thought leaders and business leaders is a good indicator of political will, very influential. And then there's what we call grassroots campaigns, involving a lot of what we do, letters to the editor and op-eds, and occasional radio interviews, social media, Facebook and such, tabling of public events and presentations, and of course letters to Congress, and, phone calls, postcards, comment forms. And I have, if anybody feels like doing postcard or comment form, I have some here. Okay, and then the last thing is empowering citizens to exercise the political will, and that's really what the purpose of the tour is identifying people who are passionate about the issue and getting them started on the road towards having the skills to exercise the political will and influence legislation. So the tour was covered 12 towns in eastern Washington and northern Idaho. In each of these towns we had a presentation. Some towns we had 2 presentations. We had other meetings with community leaders, maybe the media or maybe mayor. And this was over a 2-week period in November. So some numbers, then we had 15 presentations. The title was Saving Our Farms, Forests, and Fish While Strengthening the Economy, and attended by a total of 850 people, so that's 57 people per presentation. And we collected 390 of these comment forms, and probably most of you have filled one of those out. We gave, Cheatham and Doug Ray gave 258 or something of these to Congressman Newhouse the following week, and it really made an impact on me. We also had 5 radio interviews, which reached an untold number of people, and then 7 meetings with community leaders like the General Counsel of the Yakima Nation, David Lasheen, and he was very open to working with us, so we're very excited about that opportunity. The mayors of Pullman and Tompkinish, they had questions about the carbon fee and dividend. And then the editorial board of Walla Walla Evening Bulletin, they wrote an editorial after that. And then we met with the Okanagan County Commissioners. And that went very well, you might be surprised. I'll tell you more about that. And we had a meeting with business leaders in Twist and then in Sand Point. Very nice meeting, I'll tell you more about that. So this tour involved 3 people, me and Jen Sirowitz of Audubon, Washington. So this is a partnership of Audubon, Washington with Citizens Climate Lobby. And John Sandick is a retired Boeing engineer in Seattle. He is a fiscal conservative, and so this was very helpful in reaching conservative people in the audience. And we just had the best time together. Big part of getting people to the events was publicity. We had articles in the newspaper and ahead of most of our events, and so that was very effective. And then we had huge turnout. In Kennewick, we counted 122 people. The full house of stands, there were people standing there. It was fantastic, beyond my expectations. And so just a few photos there. You might recognize some people. There's Chuck, Richard, Doug, Layla, and Christine Brown. Pat Hessler. And I have this photo here for sure, but Shirley's not here.
That's good.
Maybe she's making phone calls. And we had time for fun too. This is Pine Badger Mountain on one free day we had, and we did try to get out most days. It's good for spirits. And then the county commissioners in Okanagan County, there are in most counties I think 3 commissioners, and we met with the 2 more conservative members, middle 2 there. And we met them at 3, and we said, how much time do we have? And they said, well, we don't have anything scheduled until 4:30. And so we met with them for an hour and 20 minutes. And we knew we had this time, so we started out just asking them about their views on climate change. And one guy was pretty accepting of the science, but the more conservative one in the blue shirt there, he said, oh, it's natural variations. And so we spent some time talking about the science, and then about the carbon dividend and the economic impact. And by the time we were done, these guys really changed their thinking about climate change. They had concerns about their electorate and how they might perceive a shift in policy, but their attitudes really changed because we had this conversation with them in a respectful way. And we also had a number of radio interviews. So this is Doug Nadwornik of, I think it's England Public Radio. He has a daily show, and he gave us 20 minutes talking about the tour and our message. I don't know how many people he reaches, but good. And then also Spokane Community Radio with Jen and Sarah Kate. There is a physician in Yakima that's been involved in CCL for a long time. She came out to Spokane that day to give a talk on health and climate change. And in San Antonio, we also had an interview on community radio there for 15 minutes. So it gives us plenty of time to get a message across. It's really a lot of fun. San Antonio was great. I love how much there. They arranged for a lunch of business leaders and civic leaders, and about 30 of them showed up. They operated a free lunch, so someone in Sandpoint paid for all their lunches. And let's see. So this woman here is the chair of the Democratic Women Democrats of Bonner County. Bonner County Women Democrats. And then this woman here next to her is the chair of the Bonner County Republican. And they were sitting next to each other and said, this is the first time this happened. So, and there's there you can barely see, but there's John explaining the carbon dividends over lunch. So they had lots of questions. Okay, and yeah, here are example, we had a different format. We had a presentation, but it was shorter to allow time for a panel to speak. So we had two panelists. This was the county commissioner here, Glenn Bailey, and then this is a forester. And so after we did our spiel, and then the forester spoke, and he said, part of our message was that climate change is depleting snowpack, drying the soils, and making forest fires worse. And he said, well, the big problem is forest management. They're not logging anymore, so there's more fuel build up, and they're fighting fires, so more fuel build up. And he did concede that climate change would make things worse. But he really emphasized management practices. And he said, we should be doing more logging. And then Glenn Bailey, he stood up and he said, climate's not changing, there's natural variation, humans aren't going to have anything to do with it, and even if we did, it would be very bad for the economy, so we shouldn't do anything. And so then they asked me to respond to their comments, and so to the forester I said, well, I agree with everything you said. And then I turned to Glenn Bailey and I said, Commissioner Bailey, I disagree with everything you said. But I might be wrong. You might be right. But there's a chance I'm right. And given how much is at stake, shouldn't we take some insurance out to protect us from that possibility? And all he could do was say, well, I like insurance. So I think there was some persuasion in that. Okay. Another packed house there. 100 people there in San Juan. We had 130 in Walla Walla. And then our last night out celebrating with our Sandpoint crew. They did a great job of reaching Republicans. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, what's the upshot of all this? We got 390 people did these constituent comment forms, and we had other people that signed on our sign-up sheet, and so we've added probably 500 people to the ranks of CCL from this tour. And now we're following up on that by contacting them. Some of the people in our group are reaching out to the people that signed up in the Tri-Cities. And then new chapters. We have a new chapter starting in Yakima next Saturday. And then in the Okanagan, we had a great turnout there of about 30 people, and one very enthusiastic person has volunteered to be the leader of an emerging chapter there. And so I'm going to be going there in February and meeting with some of the people there. And we had some existing chapters in some of these other places that were just augmenting. And then there are some, they had the hardest time really in communities that were more progressive. They had established environmental groups like Wenatchee or Ellensburg or Walla Walla. They weren't so keen on, it's hard for people to do more than one thing, you know. They have different approaches, so we'll see how all that plays out. New leader, so as I said, this guy, Okanagan is to be a new leader, and we're working on some others too in that town. Widespread appreciation for carbon fee and dividend. A lot of people on the tour had never heard of it, and they started asking skeptical questions, and as we kept answering their questions, their attitude became more and more accepting and then enthusiastic, really. In fact, in Spokane, this one guy said, after they were done, he said, you know, if I had known you were going to be talking about something so practical and effective, I would have invited 5 people. And then accepting the climate science, we didn't really talk about science much. We really wanted to get on to solutions, but certainly those Okanagan County commissioners were influenced on climate science, and there were a few others as well. Yes, and so a lot of people hope that we can break this impasse because we are really appealing to Republicans as well as Democrats. And so as we expand our sense of political will in the district, we're hoping that Newhouse can join the Climate Solutions Caucus, which is one evidence of hope for congressional action. It now has 62 members, equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats. So that's a real change in the last couple of years. We did learn a few things. First, it's very helpful to be respectful. Then a dialogue that led to identifying common ground and ultimately collaborative solutions. So that always helps. And then carbon fee and dividend, it took a while to explain it, but we allowed a lot of time for that. And once we understood, the vast majority of people embraced it as a politically practical and effective solution to climate change. And then, we emphasized our policy as a form of risk management because we're not absolutely certain about the details of climate change, but the consequences are very severe, and so it makes sense to reduce our risk exposure by taking action on these ones. And that was an effective argument for a lot of people. But there were a lot of things that we just didn't have time to get to, like impacts on what the government did on families or small businesses or agriculture. Municipality in Pullman, we had an extensive discussion with the mayor about the impact of the government did on city budgets. He was obsessing with, well, what about paying for all of our trucks, the gas for our trucks, and our school buses and such? We had to explain to them, yes, but there's more revenue because of the sales tax. There's more business because people have money in their pocket to spend. So we had some success there, but it takes time to work through these questions, and it didn't have as much time as we would like. So that's what we're following up on, really. Okay, so I would like to finish with what we can do, and the usual things: reduce your carbon footprint, be aware of your carbon footprint. There's a lot you can do, and so I urge you to do that. That's really a foundation for any interaction. And then get informed. And just about everybody here is pretty informed, but explore the CCO website. There's a lot of information there, videos and such, and work with others to build political will. Getting involved with the climate lobby. There are all sorts of ways that can be done. No one's going to do it alone. And then talk with others. There's not enough dialogue about this. I had one conversation yesterday with someone who just doesn't want to talk because she's afraid of getting into a big fight. So it takes developing some skills in how to avoid the conflict and find common ground we can talk about. Because we're not going to get done if we want to talk. So that's the tour. Any questions?
Did you find that people were more receptive in places where there weren't established environmental groups in a weird way?
Yeah.
There's sort of a marketplace of groups.
Right.
And, like going into the middle of Seattle,
yeah.
you'd probably have a harder time than
Absolutely.
Okanagan.
Absolutely. Okanagan, there, in any area there are progressives who care about climate change, but they hadn't organized to deal with climate change or the environment, and so they're really hungry for some organization, and so it's really going to happen there. The Methow, I think there's potential there too. Same sort of situation. Lewiston, Clarkston, yes, but Walla Walla, Wenatchee, Ellenburg, Spokane, they have strong District 50 and some local groups that have formed, and they have broader issues that they're addressing. Not really focused on something that's specific as a government around it. There are people that certainly that we met that we would like to focus on that, but it's going to be harder to build a larger group because
Right. And you mentioned, that there were progressives hungry for climate information. It sounds like these happier people were conservative.
I don't know. I wouldn't say half the audience was conservative. I think generally we had mostly progressives there. The conservatives that did attend were persuaded, certainly. But it's hard to get them to come. But most of them don't care about the issue. So on their priority list. In spite of our efforts.
It's pretty startling when you lay out what's going to happen to our population.
Yeah.
In fact, it's going away.
Yeah.
100 years.
Yeah.
Seems like, that would sort of transcend all the others.
Right. You would think. Adam.
I actually have two questions. My first one is, in my own discussions with people who are skeptical about climate change, I found that it's hard to discuss solutions if the existence of a problem isn't even acknowledged. And I've encountered many times where people will say, well, even if the Earth is warming, it's not carbon that's the problem. And I'd be curious to know if in your talk with conservatives, if that came up, and if it did, how you addressed it. And my second question is just a specific of carbon fee and dividend, I guess, maybe as it's being handled in this state. Do you know if the dividend is taxed or untaxed?
I think it will be taxed. But the first question, what I did in every presentation is I held up this book, this thick, and it's a report put out by the Heartland Institute, basically, printed by the Heartland Institute, and it's called the Non-Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So it's designed to look exactly like an IPCC report, the same font and everything. And so I explained this is a disinformation campaign that is designed to confuse you about the issue. And I think that was helpful in reducing some of the resistance.
Thanks.
Can you talk a little bit more about, you said Washington's climate dividend would be taxed?
So the national carbon dividend would be taxable. Yeah. But the Washington state one, there was no dividend. So it's more of a tax law.
So, to follow up on what he said, your answer. So when you say this is a disinformation campaign, do they believe you?
Yeah, I didn't get any resistance to that.
So do you know? I mean, I don't want to be like. I'm just wondering if perhaps people are being polite and that they are just not really still buying into it, or they're buying into it momentarily, and then when they go home and they talk to the usual.
Yeah. So let me tell you about Sandpoint.
I'm not trying to play devil's advocate, whatever.
So Sandpoint, like 4 months before the event, the organizer wrote and said she had concerns about representation because they've had city hearings on immigration where some of these yahoos come in and they take over the whole event, and they're very rude and obnoxious. And so I was thinking, man, maybe we should just make this an invitation only. But what they ended up doing was they handed out cards, and people had to write their questions on cards, and then we would read them and answer them. So that helped get some of the questions out without the feeling like they could interrupt. We did take some pre-questions at the end. And there was one guy there who was a conspiracy theorist, and so he had to say his little thing about chemtrails. But no, we didn't really have a problem with that, and
They probably wouldn't have come.
and I didn't spend much time on the science. I basically said we can't explain the ice ages without greenhouse gases, and I know it's hard to refute that. Some of the other explanations for ice ages were just they're grasping.
Well, in Tri-Cities and Ellensburg, there were denialists that remained
right.
very
That's
denialists.
right.
You know, in Ellensburg, there was the guy who said it's God's will.
Yeah.
Humans have no effect on climate. Period. And that was his belief. You're not going to change it with any scientific arguments.
That's right. Thank you. I
We
forgot
didn't
about that guy.
we didn't even try. Yeah. And there was the guy in Tri-Cities event, if you recall, as well, who was talking about the palm trees and the...
Yeah, right. But that's like one or two people in a
Right.
group of 100. It's like,
Right.
that's great,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if that's all you've got,
Right.
that's fabulous.
Yeah. So those people are generally not going to convince.
Right?
And that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to get everybody.
Yeah.
You'd like to.
And the key was really to make sure that people felt like they could speak. Respectfully respond to them so we can have the discussion going forward. Yeah.
Did the expected scenario of environmental effects of climate change calls for action, and like the House routinely calls for more surface impoundments for dams and things like that. Surface water storage. Yeah. So, when you talk about what's going to happen in the Northwest, then how much are people thinking and talking about mitigation when you talk to them? Certainly, like what I'm asking is, does involvement on mitigation lead to taking action, prevention? You know what I mean? Is mitigation, it's a way when you acknowledge that things are going to change, then you want to deal with it. So, have you find any connection and thought about that?
So, I don't remember if it happened on the tour, but I do occasionally get questions about adaptation, like building reservoirs. And I always say, you can do that up to a point, but there's a cost. And then I tell them that the expansion of the Yakima watershed plan is going to cost $5 billion. That's just one watershed. So there's a cost to taking action. It's not going to do. Really going to spend.
Has anyone looked at scenarios, different scenarios, like you just described early on, and then taking that down to the Northwest? So let's say expanding the watershed 5 billion. However, if we limit it to 2 degrees, it's 3 billion. You know what I mean?
Right.
Is it possible to do that kind of thing?
For people,
into real, tangible terms for people?
Well, okay, there are people that estimate the social cost of carbon, and I don't know what level of detail they go to. I don't think they go to that level of detail, but it would be very helpful to do that, because ultimately the carbon fee is justified by estimates of the social cost. And that's why Druid has challenged the Obama estimate of social cost by introducing some just ridiculous assumptions, bringing the cost down to like a tenth of what it should be. So that calculation is really important.
Yeah, and it sort of seems just kind of intuitively as if, we can kind of grasp the cost of 1 or 2 degrees rise in temperature, right? And it's going to be high but bearable.
Right.
But then if you look at the science, it's kind of like, well, you get to 3 or 4 or 5 degrees of temperature change.
Yeah.
It's like that cost is essentially infinite.
I
mean, it's just very, very high. It's just, so spend a few million, the billions or trillions or whatever to adapt to 1 or 2 or 3 degrees, but get to 4 or 5, and it's like there's not enough money.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people realize that, but not enough.
Yeah.
Sure.
What's the effect or lessons learned from the BC tax and refund program?
Good.
It's
So
been around a long time.
it's been around for like 6 years, and it was a $30 per ton tax, and it reduced BC emissions by 15 or 20%. So it's a fairly modest tax. A fairly modest impact, but reduced emissions by some and did not hurt the economy.
Lessons learned, and how much visibility does it get?
Yeah, the lessons learned. I've read some lessons learned, and they're more about how to get something like this passed, and the importance of having strong advocates in certain places in government, and It was in park on the ground.
I must have some strong advocates to get the part in there where the administrative salary is cut 15%,
Yes.
which she doesn't fully refund all the money,
Absolutely.
the data doesn't show it.
Absolutely.
They have to give several glosses above that, the same,
Yeah.
same criteria, but,
Yeah, that's what we need.
yeah, that'd be really hard to pass on our system, so.
So,
How many government officials' salaries are adjustable for lack of performance? Or error?
I don't know. But maybe it's her. Yeah. I don't know.
So not a lot of lessons that come to mind. I mean, it's small. So.
Certainly having some strong advocates at high levels is important. Okay.
I was just wondering, through all these meetings, if there's any talk or sympathy for wildlife extinctions, that there's wildlife extinctions in
Well, so Jen Zura was with Audubon. I mean, that was her message. Every meeting was a third of the species is endangered or something by climate change. A big number. I don't remember the fraction, but it was a big number. So that was a big motivator for. Was that?
Does anybody care?
I couldn't tell how many Audubon people were there.
You have to be an Audubon person to care the fact that
Oh yeah.
wildlife is suffering.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I remember there was an Audubon person from Elmsburg there. But we didn't. We talked a lot about impact on birds, fires, irrigation water, drought, and so on. In our presentation, and we asked people to talk to their neighbor about how they felt about that, what their memories were, and some of it got very personal. I mean, poor firefighters in Swiss lost their lives fighting fire, and so some of the people in Swiss knew so many people had died. On the other hand, the Clarence County Commissioner said your presentation was too emotional.
One of the things about caring and who cares and who doesn't is a really slippery.
Yeah.
Because I'm a lifetime member of Sierra Club, a lifetime and I get these, I get my magazine, I get plus 2 months. They run a massive travel agency. And I could fly to Antarctica to go marvel at the melting glacier. And it's just this amazing cognitive dissonance. And they had a fundraising thing, because once you sign up as a lifetime member, you get a fundraising. And so if I gave $1,000, I could win a trip to Machu Picchu, Canyon. So I calculated the carbon cost, and it's about a ton, and I figured, well, I could just go burn a ton of coal in my backyard and cut out the middle. You know what I mean? So when we think about who cares and who doesn't, it's really hard. It's so hard even for people we consider among our tribe to behave logically and rationally. You would think with what you just described, what we hear all the time about the incredible transformation of our environment that's going to happen, that it would change behavior more broadly, that they would stop selling. I mean, they don't, at least if they would impose some sort of mandatory carbon tax, they kind of route you to an off-site, where you can sign up for some sort of thing and you can run the water well in Ghana or something. I'm with the whole thing. So I'm just saying, is the response of who cares and who doesn't.
And I guess there's absolutely no discussion about population. The Sierra Club's come out with child born today uses 7 times more energy than, and this was probably about 5 years ago, I read this, than people born in the past. And I don't know how they came up with that. I always wanted to ask. I imagine so that provides some appropriate because everything is battery. So, since I was born, I've been battling this zero population growth thing, which seems to be like cliche now.
Yeah.
But it's obviously everyone on Earth is responsible for this on a higher up, I guess, in our civilized world, where it is. So is there, I guess there's never any mention about going back to the basics of limiting people?
Well, it definitely needs to be done. Citizens find a lobby is not going to take it down, but it is a huge driver, and it's not an easy one because there's things we can do, but there are places in Africa where they think that those efforts to control birth rate are trying to eliminate the population. So it's not easy in some places, but we can make it worse too by withdrawing. I think that's what's been happening last year. It's not this,
To come back to your original question about who cares, etc., I think the point of this tour has been that we have no idea what they got out of this tour. That there was no exit survey or exit poll to get to know better who was our audience and what they got out of it. I think a questionnaire, because we focused on the constituent forms, because that's what we brought to the lobby days in DC. But I think if we were to do a tour like that, it's a must that we need some kind of either online or on paper polling, asking very simple questions about, if they want to identify, do they identify independent, Republican, Democrat, male, female, all these things, and then what was the most important point they got out of this, hear it from them, rather than making assumptions like we do, or they like this, they like that. It would be nice to have that as a data.
I think we have access to about half of the people that attended because they did fill out those forms and sign up. And we are in the process of calling them with a set of questions, but they're not oriented towards what you got out of the event.
Right.
So that's a good question to add to that. So I'll talk to Louise about that. Thank you.
But also, you don't know when you do a survey immediately afterwards. You don't necessarily know how the person's going to be thinking in the future. There's no way to really measure what seed you've planted by having that conversation. So hopefully it will explain it. So would you do it again?
Hold on, Mark.
Just another point in that, I know, it seems like a lot of people kind of know these things. They know that they get the facts, or they hear the facts, but they don't really intrinsically feel them, And I think that's what needs to happen more than just getting these facts and then leaving the room and getting distracted by every other thing, and it kind of bounces off. Yeah. But by writing something about it while they're in there, they'll go through it in their mind, and it will, ideas will be more strong, hopefully, for some of them anyway. So
it was interesting. We had more success with the constituent comment forms some places than others. We did really well here. Just the way we set things up with the tables and everything. Other places it didn't work so well. I think one place we just forgot to remind them in our presentation to fill it out. So people listening to it.
One thing that you might consider, and I don't know if this would be more than you could actually
hope to accomplish, but if you could have a survey about people's opinions on certain climate change ideas before your presentation, and then again afterwards, you might be able to see how persuasive you were. One way of doing that could even be with that survey software where you have real-time polls where people respond as you're giving.
Oh, electronic.
Yeah, we've used that at QNL before to get the real-time feedback. And it might be interesting, like you have an hour lecture to know what people think before and then what they think after.
So you know how to set that up?
No. But I'm sure that it would be possible to figure that out. What I don't know is what, pays for things. I don't know what the cost of that kind of
So,
software.
Gina, you have some experience with that, right?
Right. I mean, I had suggested it in summer. It just comes with a fee. Those kind of past a certain size, like past 25, 50 people, you have to pay a fee to utilize that kind of service. But there are a couple of them online that you can incorporate into your presentation.
Yeah, I've been on the recipient end where I do the real-time response, but I haven't implemented it myself. But it might be interesting to see how you're changing perceptions. And I mean, you have kind of an informal assessment that, it seems like we reached this person. Especially if you're anonymous in a big group and you just kind of see the responses mount.
I like that because I tried asking at the end of a presentation, how many had their opinions on climate change because of the presentation, and who's going to admit that?
One way or the other.
Well, and then just something like, before you start talking, I believe that human activity contributes to climate warming. Hold them before and hold them again afterwards and see if the percentage.
No, and having it more anonymous.
Have it anonymous.
Makes it much easier for them to be honest.
That's right. That's right. Plus, if people see, oh my gosh, everybody else in the audience apparently believes human activity.
And part of it is you display the results.
Yeah, you display the results. You display the results as you go, and then people think, my neighbors around me are, maybe I should think about this. Because there's an element of the sheep to all of us. I'm sure I'm going to do where, everybody else thinks this. Well, maybe I should think about it.
Should have done that. But next time. I know Brenda had one earlier.
Well, I was just going to ask if you thought this was worthwhile and if you would do it again. And if so, do you think that there would be a benefit maybe if you do it again and targeting a specific audience such as farmers and going into territory that's not mainly progressives. And because I think that's a problem, we just don't seem to be able to get a good way to communicate with that culture.
So we did go to Moses Lake, and I have to say it was really hard to even get an event in Moses Lake. There's not many progressive there. In the end, Gina and I went to a Democrat potluck picnic in the summer, and I met people and found someone who was willing to organize the event. And I think there were some farmers there.
Well, they always have these farm forums and things like that, and I don't think you probably couldn't even get into them. I don't even know if they'd listen to allow anyone in to talk about it.
Farm forums, so Laura had an experience.
Yeah, Laura, I know it was bad, but I'm saying if you were a formal presenter that was invited into these forums, it seems like there would have to be more respect on the way it went versus just yelling at somebody because you disagree with what they're saying.
How do you get to be a presenter?
Right. I think it might be difficult, but I think if there's a way to do it, it might be valuable.
I think my conclusion from that was that they are way too scared to admit to each other at this point. That so we really need to kind of talk to them individually. That's the conclusion that I came to.
Is this on the same subject?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, one way to reach these people in the community is their calcium to our approaches is to not approach about climate, or climate in terms of a political connection to climate, even though that's, first you got to establish a relationship with somebody for those. There's a company in Seattle called Climate Corporation, and they have, heard of it, they've got a bunch of really smart computer scientists and supercomputers, and their goal is to provide a better job than NOAA on prediction. They sell this climate prediction stuff, so farmers know about this. And so if you had, they were bought by some big company because obviously, more focused climate prediction. As climate gets more variable, the window of prediction is more important now.
Yeah.
So you have somebody come in and talk about climate, and farming and prediction, weather. Talk about weather.
Yeah.
You come in and talk about weather,
Yeah.
and you talk about climate. And that's a start. And you've established a relationship. And it's like Cliff Mass. Cliff Mass reaches an enormous, I don't know if you know about it, you've got the blog, W Professor and Meteorologist, enormously popular and well-known and influential all through the Northwest.
And he is very supportive of carbon negativity.
Right. Yeah.
So, you don't need to duplicate what he's doing, but I have talked to him about this in front of him. He's like what we're doing. He's doing something that complements very well. So,
Go ahead.
I think it's really important that we do something because, and it's kind of scary to me to see, like, not only was the Washington Policy Center hosting that last town hall meeting, they're also hosting the Ag Expo now.
Yeah.
They are really moving in on Ag
yeah, they're getting more
big
funding.
time.
I think.
Yeah, and so, we could easily just totally lose any chance of getting to the farmers if we don't get there soon.
Yeah.
And what they don't, it seems like there's a lack of understanding is that they're going to be extremely effective. I'm not really sure why they don't see that. I guess because they don't believe it. I don't know. I don't really know. It'd be just an assumption on my part. I don't know why.
Who doesn't see what?
The farmers don't see climate change, so they just refuse to look at it, and they're going to be the most impacted as far as the money they make and how they can proceed, because they don't have huge margins in their profits, and it doesn't take much to put them under. Because you got big corporations coming in now too, and pretty much doing most of the farming, but.
They're selling it as a good thing in this state. They're selling this as warming temperatures as a competitive advantage to the local farmers.
It's going to put the California farmers out of business. Is the message to them.
And if
it's
they
going to make their crop much
water,
more valuable on the
we can
market.
find water. Yeah.
Shorter outlook. Shorter time.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam.
One, not to bring the conversation back to something previous, but in terms of having people respond to opinions change during the meeting, and I think people were talking about having something on a smartphone in real time. And I think that's a great idea in terms of it's simple and efficient, but I also worry, especially in these small communities like Twist and places where you're going to have a lot of older people or a lot of more conservative people who might not have a smartphone or might not even want to sign up for another app. Like, I worry that the responses you'd get would be self-selecting just because of that.
Oh, interesting.
It might be better, even if you have to have somebody like one of us transcribe them, you could just have like a piece of paper with fill this out before the talk, flip it over, fill this out after the talk, and then when everyone's leaving, you can badger people like, fill that out, and you collect them. And just because I do worry, I don't have a smartphone, but I would definitely want to fill this out if I were there, but I wouldn't be able to. Or people, phones die and stuff.
More
So.
people have smartphones than you might think.
You don't need a smartphone. All you need is something that can receive and send SMS. And all the phones do that. All the cell phones. Anybody with an SMS
It's texting.
It's actually not an app.
Oh, okay.
It's just like the numbers you sign up to receive your action messages. You know what I mean? It's that simple. It's a simple technology.
But I think he makes a good point
But
that the type of
people-
population you're
Right.
reaching
Yeah.
would be skeptical about, like, if you've got some conspiracy theory sort of thing. Even because people can fall in a range. You've got people who really believe stuff and people who are sort of worried a little bit all the time. And so signing up for something or giving their number out would probably give them a little bit of pause at least.
True. We don't want to lose the chemtrail people.
I think there's very few of the real paranoid people, but it is a good point that there is some self-selection going on. This sort of thing, probably. It's hard to say how much. Sharon.
I know that Steve, he hasn't said this yet, but he just joined the No-Till Association. Might have been a little ahead of the game here, but because there is a farm forum going on next week, and he may not be able to go, but so it's really looking for other people who care about farming issues or have would be willing to go to this kind of conference because you have a specific goal. And why don't you say what that is?
Yeah, so our last chapter meeting, Doug Ray put forward this strategy of getting Newhouse out for a meeting during the district recess in spring through one of three ways. One was green energy, one was, I think, impacts, and the third was organic farming, or some sort of advanced farming. Low carbon,
sustainable, or farming
Yeah.
practices. Yeah.
And I really prefer that to the last one because there are so many farmers, and you're not just a farmer, and also because he is sponsoring a bill that would benefit small organic farms. So the idea of going to the no-till conferences to meet people that might want to showcase their farm in your house. But I'm not going to go. But there are lots of meetings with farmers in January and February, so there should be other opportunities to meet farmers. And Kurt may know some farmers.
January, February, when they're free to do this.
Right. So you're looking for, wouldn't that be a good thing to do, to form like a small subgroup who either cares about farming issues or wants to learn more or knows about such issues, and and take slowly but surely build some expertise to where you could then relationships that you could then probably those one-to-one meetings to start with, but then eventually be either invited to be on a panel or to get some meetings done. It's going to take time.
So does it make sense, and this is really legitimately a question, when you're talking to these farmers who maybe are reluctant to accept the science that says that the climate is going to change and that that's going to affect their farming, to adopt a little bit of Ginger Wireman's tactic of talking about maybe some of the other impacts of
health.
Yeah, and in a sense that's a little bit disingenuous, right? Because the real impact on farming isn't the particulate, it isn't the carbon, it's the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that's going to change the climate, but it might be a way to open the door, right? I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's an idea.
There are estimates of the social cost to health effects of fossil fuel, and it's not negligible.
Right. I mean, I think people make the argument that you can set aside the climate change part and say this is worth doing, even aside from the climate change part. If you just look at the health effects and the other negative impacts that are associated with carbon consumption, it's like this is still sufficiently bad that we shouldn't be doing.
I'm curious. You mentioned that one of the folks said that the presentation was too emotional. I was kind of wondering where that line might be on this issue. I would argue to a lot of folks that we should be doing this just on a base of responsibility.
Right.
Like we have, we should be taking care of the land that we have.
Yeah.
We should be taking care of the earth that we've been given. Is that considered too emotional an argument?
I don't think
They're
so.
insulted by
Not by most people, I think, and probably the person who said that might be an exception. Because I really do think that's a compelling argument for a lot of people.
Yeah, we certainly did express it as a risk management approach, but we also did have these, photos of fires. And we didn't have polar bears, but so I'm not sure how effective that was in the end.
With maybe hard numbers or just logical risk management arguments were more compelling in terms of convincing people. I'm just wondering how you reach out to somebody that's got responsibility over a farm.
Right.
What they're mainly interested in is the economics. I mean, even when they do solar panels,
It's economics.
Well, economics always comes down, but people don't just think about economics. I mean, people are motivated by something beyond
Really,
just
we showed photos of dead trees, dead orchards, and you would think that would not be too emotional for a farmer.
very emotional for a farmer.
Right? And that,
well, they'll just say they'll grow something else.
Right.
Yeah, it's great. It's wonderful. That's the history. And the great thing about going to Mayfield and looking at people more, we get more data. It's easy for us to, if a group we're not familiar with, to jump to a caricature. Like, okay, if I was going to say, there's a meeting where people are worried about climate change, okay? And you think that maybe they're all vegan, but I look around and I saw a whole lot of pepperoni. So again, the idea of farmers being just completely rural Archie type. You know what I mean? It is not constructive to ever really talk about them in that way. That's kind of the discipline to not talk about them. And then you get past your own prejudice and can start to just think about where they are.
I would kind of think that anyone who makes an argument that a presentation is too emotional was seeking some way of dismissing the argument because they have something else against it. When I think back on talks and presentations that I've been to, if I'm thinking back on something from 5 years ago, it's not the drive back to previous talks that I remember. It's those that made some kind of emotional connection.
That's what people remember.
That's what people remember. That's how you reach people. It's through emotional engagement. So that also would be more threatening if somebody feels like you're using emotional engagement for a message that they don't agree with. So they might be trying to dismiss you that way.
Good point.
And I think the science of getting people to change their minds backs up what you said.
Data doesn't stick.
And Chuck is going to talk about that on Friday next week at the Tri-City Democrats meeting, right?
Well, we need to go back to your first bullet, which was you gotta know your farmer.
Right.
Because you cannot go to a farmer and tell him he's taking care of his land. Because he's always taking care of his land. He knows that he's clever. You can't go in with the idea that no-till is new. It's been around for 100 years.
Right.
It's done a big in Walla Walla, as well as in the Midwest. You gotta acknowledge the fact that they no longer burn their fields.
Right.
That they now bail the wheat cutters and stuff. You gotta, know who you're talking to.
I was at a Washington policy conference in Spokane, I think it was last May, and they had a section on agriculture, and the two women presented and really impressed me with what they're doing to reduce all sorts of emissions.
Peer-to-peer school.
And they're required to, but I was just really impressed with.
Usually no force.
Yeah, but I was really impressed with the progress they were making.
I think you're right. Even if they're not taking care of it, they think they are.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, they are.
They're
For
totally
the next 10 years,
they,
or, you know, or,
In the way
their
that
window
they
is
know.
10 years, or,
Yeah.
you know.
In the way they know, in the way they've always done it.
You know, with new improvements too. I mean, you know, that's all these meetings you were just talking about. That's what they talk about at those
Take
meetings,
a
right?
picture of that,
All
post it on the
improvements.
website.
Lessons learned.
Right.
nobody
I
likes
checked
to
it
be
out.
told they're doing things wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I don't think it's going to get very good.
Maybe one of us, we want to go travel. It comes up with some rationalization that our travel is justified. You know, like, you just go to Antarctica, we'll find a reason to tell ourselves we're doing it right.
Yeah.
That seems like they want to make a comment about traveling to
Well, I hope
Washington.
you found this helpful, and I appreciate the discussion.
You just have to use more carbon-free bulbs so you can travel more.
Yeah.
Trade-off.
A little bulb on the